He never lost a battle. For 16 years he marched across Italy, crushing every Roman army sent to destroy him, standing on the soil of his greatest enemy with nobody able to stop him. By every measure of the battlefield, Hannibal Barca was the most dangerous man alive. And yet he died alone, hunted, drinking poison in a foreign land, abandoned by the very city he had spent his entire life trying to save. This is the story of Hannibal, the general who won everything that mattered on the battlefield, and still lost it all. To understand Hannibal, you have to understand hatred. As a boy of 9, in the city of Carthage, his father took him to an altar and made him swear an oath to never, as long as he lived, be a friend to Rome. Carthage and Rome were the two great powers of the ancient Mediterranean, and they had already fought one brutal war. Hannibal's father had watched Carthage humiliated, and he raised his son to be a weapon. When Hannibal came of age and took command of Carthage's armies in Spain, he did not wait for Rome to come to him. He decided to do the unthinkable. He would bring the war to Italy itself by marching an entire army, including war elephants, over the Alps. Nobody believed it could be done. The Alps were a wall of ice and stone, freezing, treacherous, defended by hostile mountain tribes. Hannibal led nearly 50,000 men, 9,000 cavalry, and 37 elephants into those mountains. Avalanches buried his soldiers. Tribesmen ambushed his columns. Men froze to death on narrow paths above 1,000-foot drops. By the time he descended into Italy, he had lost nearly half his army. But he had done it. Hannibal stood in Italy with a battered, exhausted force, and Rome had no idea what was about to happen to them. What followed was one of the most astonishing military campaigns in human history. At the river Trebia, Hannibal lured a Roman army across freezing water and annihilated it. At Lake Trasimene, he hid his entire army in the morning fog and ambushed a Roman force of 25,000 men, trapping them against the lake. It was not a battle. It was a slaughter. But all of that was only the beginning. In the year 216 BC, near a small town called Cannae, Hannibal would create the masterpiece that generals still study 2,000 years later. Rome, desperate and furious, assembled the largest army in its history, nearly 80,000 men, to finally crush this invader once and for all. Hannibal had less than 50,000. He was outnumbered, deep in enemy territory, with no way to retreat. So he did something no commander had ever dared. He placed his weakest troops in the center and deliberately let them be pushed back. The massive Roman army, smelling victory, pressed forward into the center, exactly as Hannibal wanted. And as they pushed in, Hannibal's cavalry destroyed the Roman horsemen on the flanks and swung around behind them. Then, his strongest infantry closed in from the sides. In a single afternoon, the Roman army was completely surrounded and butchered. Between 50 and 70,000 Roman soldiers died at Cannae in one day. To this day, it remains one of the deadliest single days of combat in all of human history. Rome lost a fifth of its entire male population over the age of 17 in a few hours. Hannibal was at the gates. Rome was in panic. By every logic of war, the war was over. He had won. And this is where the tragedy begins. Hannibal did not march on Rome. Some say he could not, that he lacked siege equipment, that his army was too small to storm the greatest fortified city of the world. One of his own officers famously told him, "You know how to win a victory, Hannibal, but you do not know how to use one." But the deeper problem was not Rome. It was Carthage. Back home, the leaders of Carthage, wealthy, cautious, jealous, refused to send Hannibal the reinforcements he begged for. The greatest general of the age was winning impossible victories in Italy, and his own government left him to wither. They sent him scraps. They argued over money. They distrusted his growing fame. The weapon his father had forged was abandoned by the very hand that should have wielded it. So Hannibal did the only thing he could. He stayed. Year after year after year, he marched up and down Italy, undefeated, but slowly bleeding. He could win every battle, but he could not win the war alone. Meanwhile, Rome learned. They stopped fighting him directly. A Roman general named Fabius shadowed Hannibal's army for years, refusing to give battle, cutting off supplies, wearing him down. And then Rome did to Carthage exactly what Hannibal had done to Italy. They sent a brilliant young general named Scipio to invade Carthage's homeland in North Africa. Suddenly, after 16 years, Carthage screamed for Hannibal to come home. The undefeated conqueror of Italy had to abandon everything he had fought for and sail back to defend a city that had ignored him for a decade and a half. In the year 202 BC, at a place called Zama, Hannibal faced Scipio. For the first time in his life, Hannibal was the one outmaneuvered. Scipio had studied him. Scipio neutralized his elephants, outfought his cavalry, and used Hannibal's own tactics against him. The undefeated general lost the only battle that truly mattered. Carthage surrendered. The war was over, and Hannibal had lost. But even then, his story was not finished. Hannibal did not flee or hide. He tried to rebuild Carthage, to reform its corrupt government, to make it strong again. And for that, his enemies at home, the same men who had abandoned him, turned on him and reported him to Rome. So the greatest general of the ancient world became a fugitive. He fled east, from kingdom to kingdom, always one step ahead of Roman agents who never stopped hunting him. Rome could not rest while Hannibal still breathed. Years passed. He grew old in exile, advising foreign kings, always watching the horizon for the men sent to capture him. Finally, in a small kingdom by the sea, the Romans cornered him. His last refuge had agreed to hand him over. There would be no escape this time. Hannibal looked at the soldiers surrounding the house, and he said, "Let us relieve the Romans of their long anxiety, since they think it too long to wait for the death of an old man." He had kept poison hidden in a ring for exactly this moment, and he drank it. The man who had crossed the Alps, who had annihilated the largest army Rome ever fielded, who had stood undefeated on enemy soil for 16 years, died alone, in a borrowed house, by his own hand, far from the city he was born to save. Hannibal won nearly every battle he ever fought. He outthought, outmarched, and outfought the greatest military power on earth. But you do not win wars with battles alone. You win them with the support of those behind you. And that was the one thing Hannibal never had. His genius was never the problem. His city was. And no amount of brilliance on the battlefield can save a man whose own people have already given up. The losing side.